May it please the court. The defendant was supposed to be the designated driver. Because the defendant decided to drive drunk, a young girl is dead. Vanessa Sullivan, who will never get to know the joy of another day, let alone another birthday, was celebrating her 21st birthday, the night she was killed. She'd invited the defendant along with her to go see a band, and all she has in return is that the defendant be aware that he might have to be the designated driver. He agreed, but that night he drank and he didn't stop. The defendant was the first one to arrive at the bar that night. He came in, he went straight to the bar, he sat down, and he had a drink. And then he had another drink, and he had another drink, and he had another drink still, until Vanessa Taylor came. And then he got up with these girls, went to find a seat to watch the band, sat down with these girls that he promised to get home safely, and he ordered another drink. And you're going to hear this from the server that night. The server will tell you that, the one that brought all the drinks to the defendant and Taylor and Vanessa's table, that the idea of the defendant driving that night, after watching her down drink after drink, was laughable. And that the defendant knew this because the defendant asked her for pills to help her concentrate. The defendant didn't get pills that night. Which she did get was a shot of grain alcohol to help her concentrate. And after this shot, she goes out, she gets behind the wheel of a car, and she fishtails out of the parking lot. And you're going to hear this from the cabbie that night. A woman that sees this decision being made regularly, that sees people make the right choice, and that night watched the defendant make the wrong one. She's going to tell you that the defendant was offered a ride time and time again. And the defendant refused. After drinking in that bar all day, she decided that she was fit to get behind that wheel and drive. And she decided to swerve her way to Canyon Road in the dark, the rain pouring down. She got to Canyon Road. And she swerved off the road. She swerved back on. Until finally the car spun out of control. She smashed that car into a utility pole and smashed Vanessa Sullivan into a tree. And you're going to hear from the officer, the first responding officer that night. And he's going to tell you that the defendant failed 4 field sobriety tests. He's going to tell you that after failing all 4 of these tests, the defendant refused to take a breathalyzer test. Now, we as the prosecution have the burden of proof today. And we have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt of the defendant driving under the influence and of murder. Now, you don't mean murder in a traditional sense, but the actions the defendant took that night were substantially and unjustifiably risky. The defendant was speeding after drinking in a bar all day, and she didn't stop even though it was raining. She didn't stop even though it was dark. And she didn't stop even when approaching a curve in the road. You know, the defendant got to walk away from that accident. Got to go see her parents again. Vanessa Sullivan's parents only got the call that every single parent fears. Instead of celebrating her life on her birthday, Vanessa's parents have to mourn her death. At the end of this trial, my co-counsel is going to ask you for a verdict. I'm the defendant guilty.
Yes, ma'am. Can I proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
May it please the court, members of the jury, opposing counsel. This was a tragic accident, not a malicious murder. On September 24, 2010, Danny Dawson met up with her friends Vanessa Sullivan and Taylor Hobson to celebrate Vanessa's 21st birthday. They went to a local bar to watch one of their favorite bands perform. They had a few drinks, and at the end of the night, they decided it would be best if Danny drove them home. Unfortunately, as Danny started to drive them home, it began to rain. It started to rain harder and harder until finally Danny found herself driving in the middle of a downpour on an unlit country road. And that's when disaster struck. A deer jumped out in front of the car, and Danny had a split second to make a decision.